please enjoy this ad-free episode as part of our Academic Integrity series sponsored by Pangram Labs, the world's leading AI detection tool. Try it out at pangram.com. That's pangram.com.
Welcome back, everybody. It's your time to Ed Up on the Ed Up Experience podcast, where we make education your business. This is Elvin Freitas, co-founder of the Ed Up Experience, and we are back on another amazing academic integrity episode with my co-host, who is the most. He is Bradley Emmy. He's a CTO and co-founder of Pangram Labs. Bradley, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Elvin. How about you?
I'm doing fantastic. Living the dream. Happy to have our guest here, so I'm going to bring him in right away. And he's got a cool name, and we can't get into it, but he's got a very fantastic. His name is G.L. Black, Vice Provost for Student Affairs and Dean of Students at Vanderbilt. GL, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
Well, thanks for being here. We appreciate it. We like to jump right on in. So, GL, tell us about what you do and how do you do it?
So, like you said, I'm the Vice Provost for Student Affairs and Dean of Students at Vanderbilt. So really, I think most of my role is centered on our students' experience that occurs outside of the classroom. So I think of a lot of our division as providing those foundational supports that allow students to progress academically, succeed academically, and really fulfill the academic mission of the institution. So we are a large division of about 200 staff members committed to the student experience. We cover areas like housing, student involvement, student organizations, all the traditional things you might think of with student affairs. We also have all of our student health and well-being areas, and our belonging and communities centers. And so within one of our areas, we do have academic integrity as part of one of our offices.
Yeah, that sounds like it's in the classroom, though.
So it's interesting because I think there's a real connection, and one benefit that we have at Vanderbilt is I'm a vice provost, so I sit within academic affairs. So it actually creates really nice synergy between the outside of the classroom and the inside of the classroom, all being housed together in academic affairs. So you're right. There's certainly a big component of academic integrity that is in the classroom, but I really think of academic integrity as kind of an organizing principle for a community. And that's where I think you get the connectivity between the inside and outside the classroom.
Yeah, that leads me to my follow-up question is, how do you define academic integrity? And you can take it as your own personal definition or the university's definition, up to you.
Well, we certainly have a statement of our honor code. So, that's sort of a formal university definition, I guess you could say, for academic integrity. But like I said, I really think about it more as an organizing principle for the community. So if you think about everyone having a role to play in a community, you think about what we're trying to do here, right? We're trying to educate students about good academic practice. And so the faculty and staff have a role in inculcating those academic values and educating the students. And the students have a role to play in that they act within the disciplines. And the community then has to have a mechanism to, enforce, but I don't think that's the primary mechanism within academic integrity. So we do have our honor councils, and they do a great deal of work around education and support for academic integrity. And they do also enforce the honor code as well when needed. But the goal is obviously to come together in a collaborative spirit and address these, good academic practices together.
Yeah, would you be able to just kind of briefly summarize for our audience, like kind of what the honor code says, like what the students are agreeing to?
Yeah, so the honor code, we have sort of a long form statement and a short form pledge. So the long statement really is focused on an aspirational statement that the students are agreeing to. And we actually have something called a community commitment ceremony at the beginning of every year, where the students actually sign the honor code and another value statement that we have called the community creed. So the long form statement's really focused on entering the relationship and entering your time at the university, agreeing to uphold those values around academic honesty, professionalism, open engagement, respect, and those sort of values that are evident both in the honor code and the community creed. And then the short form pledge is a little more of like a useful tool for faculty to use on assignments and tests that basically says sort of, I pledge on my honor that I haven't given any or received any unauthorized help on this assignment.
Yeah. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. And so, like, who is kind of accountable for enforcing the honor code? Like, is it kind of the students all kind of policing themselves? Like, or do the faculty have a role to play in this? Is there an administrative body in charge of academic integrity? Like, kind of what does the accountability look like?
So what I actually love about our system at Vanderbilt is that it is student driven. And it was actually student created. So our honor code is as old as the university. So it's about 150 years old. We just celebrated our 150th anniversary. And a couple of faculty members sort of created the concept of the honor code at Vanderbilt, but they actually turned it over to the students immediately. So the students sort of loosely enforced it until they formed a more formal honor council around 1900. And since that time, it has been upheld by the students through a student-run honor system and student-run honor councils since then. So I really like that. There's a lot of, strength, I think, in peer accountability and the students being the ones to engage with one another around these topics. Certainly, like I said, the faculty have a role to play. They are definitely involved in educating students within disciplines about what is responsible, academic conduct. And all of the honor councils, we have an undergraduate honor council, and then each of our graduate and professional schools has an honor council. They all involve faculty in some way or another in an advisory capacity. But something I really like about ours is it's a really robust student-driven initiative.
Yeah, definitely. And I also went to Stanford, where it's very similar, like, students enforce the honor code. Yet at Stanford, like, during my time there, we had some pretty massive cheating scandals. In large part because, well, I don't want to say because of, but kind of, none of our tests were proctored, for example. And so, there were rings of students that would all sit next to each other and kind of look over each other's shoulders, right? And so, like, in practice, like, kind of like what do students do when they see other students kind of not upholding that honor code, and like kind of like how do students kind of self-monitor the cheating problem?
Yeah, and we have part of when we were talking with students at the community commitment ceremony and having them engage in some, thought around academic integrity is not just thinking about sort of the potential violations and what that looks like, but it is sort of, again, in that aspirational tone and how to navigate situations when you may be confronted by a peer who is making decisions that, you don't agree with and or might violate the honor code. And so we have an element of sort of the personal responsibility for each student, and then also the personal responsibility to try to hold other students accountable. So our honor code contemplates students being able to address one another in an informal way around potential honor code violations. And it also gives them the ability to report to the honor council a matter that then, maybe needs to be reviewed and then obviously go through more of an administrative process at that point. But it's definitely part of what we talk about in terms of being an active citizen and upholding those values that you're signing when you come to the university.
Yeah, absolutely. And is the honor council also kind of student driven?
Yes.
Yeah, so I guess what does that look like? So if I'm a student, I see my classmate like cheating on a test, and I talk to them, I report them to the honor council, then like kind of what happens next?
Sure. So the honor council, they have various roles that they play in terms of moving a case forward. We do have staff members who help them with their investigative process. So, once a report's received, there's an investigative process where an investigator will be assigned and engage with the person who's filed the report. And then, the student who may be accused of potentially violating the honor code. And they go back and forth in investigative meetings to collect as much information as they possibly can, all the relevant documentation. And then they submit that to the honor council president to review to determine if there's enough to move forward to a hearing. And then we have a couple different hearing options. We have large panels and small panels, and which one is sort of dependent on the various factors within the case. So the honor council members then serve as the hearing panelists. So we have presiding officers, recording sort of secretaries, and then panelists. And then every student who goes through the process also is assigned an honor council member to be an advisor. And that person is with them through the entire process, both as a support person and as someone who's very familiar with the process and can explain everything. So then they go through a hearing process, and then they would, obviously deliberate and generate an outcome, and then move forward, from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So even though there kind of is this honor code and the language is very like kind of aspirational and that like, we believe that we can all uphold themselves to these standards, like, there still is a pretty like substantial like, administrative process too that kind of backs this up and kind of does acknowledge the reality that like, okay, like not everybody's going to uphold the honor code all the time. People are going to make mistakes.
Right, exactly. I mean, I think we want to be aspirational and educational, and that is sort of the thrust of a lot of the commitments that we ask students to make and a lot of the education that we do. But we do have to face practical realities that obviously within a system and a structure and a community, not everybody always behaves in the way in a way that accords with those values. So, right, we have to have mechanisms, and that's what the honor council process is really for, to be able to follow through and carry on those commitments.
Yep. And then do the faculty also have an equivalent honor code that they have to commit to as well?
They have some requirements related to like responsible research conduct, and things of that nature that are and processes related to that governed by the faculty manual. It doesn't operate quite the same, and I'm not sure if there is educational programming or sort of aspirational statements around that. I think that's probably a little bit more of a practical application of research standards and things of that nature.
Right, of course. Yeah, I mean, in research, obviously, like, the standards are kind of upheld by the greater communities. But even within Vanderbilt itself, we've had a lot of guests on the podcast talk about like, okay, what is the faculty's responsibility to create academic integrity culture, right? It's like, we had another great guest, Dr. Bertram Gallant saying like, if you're trying to lose weight, you can't keep like sugary donuts and like cookies in your pantry. Right? Like, you have to create an environment that makes upholding academic integrity easy. And so like, I guess like, what do the faculty, like kind of what does that look like for the faculty in the sense of like, how are the faculty like kind of trained to not have sugary donuts in the pantry per se?
Yeah. Resist that temptation.
Yeah.
The faculty, so we engage with the faculty, and often, in particular with new faculty coming into the university, to sort of give them an overview of the process and the system and the resources and support that are available to them. So we, through the Honor Council and through our Student Accountability, Community Standards, and Academic Integrity Office, we offer a lot of tips and best practices for how faculty can create an environment in the classroom. And we also have some other resources within faculty affairs that even helps them think through, pedagogically, what might that look like. So, some of our tips that we give are obviously very practical in terms of clarity in your syllabus, or we provide sample syllabus statements, clarity in instructions, different things to consider in working with students and being open and accessible for questions. And then, like I said, obviously there's some pedagogical things that faculty may engage with to set up that environment in the classroom to promote academic integrity. So yeah, there's a lot of work for them to learn about it and figure it out and know what's available to them, and best practices that they can try to avoid any confusion. And that's, I think a lot of times we see most students don't necessarily intend to violate the honor code. It's often the result of stress, pressure, last minute decision making, or sometimes a lack of clarity with regard to material or instructions or things of that nature.
Right. And to what extent are faculty kind of held accountable for assessment security? Like, do faculty use like plagiarism checkers, proctoring, like kind of like any like trust but verify kind of methods and like tools to uphold academic integrity? Or is it kind of more like Stanford where it's like, okay, there's no proctoring, there's no checking, like, we just trust people?
I mean, generally, faculty, I think, have a lot of autonomy to determine how they want to run their course in their classroom. So while being respectful of that autonomy, I think there are a lot of standard practices that I've seen in my time at Vanderbilt where most faculty, I think, do proctor, whether it's themselves or their teaching assistants, things of that nature, exams. A lot of faculty do use plagiarism detection software, running papers and assignments through that. And a lot of times those are actually available to students and they can actually run their papers and things through them themselves.
Can they run their peers' papers through them too?
I don't know if anyone's done that, but I don't recall any reports about that. So they do utilize tools and strategies, in computer science, for example, there's a whole program that they run for computer science assignments. And that department has actually been very committed to academic integrity. They actually have, as a department, their own sort of statement on academic integrity, and all the faculty in that department have been really engaged in adding those statements to their syllabi and engaging with students more directly kind of on the topic. So it varies department by department, but certainly, efforts by the faculty in that arena.
Right. So it's kind of up to the individual faculty. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. And so actually, kind of part of the reason that we reached out and we're kind of curious talking to Vanderbilt in particular is because, as you know, our day-to-day work is in AI detection and kind of research around AI detection and how it's being used and all of that good stuff. And quite early in the days of ChatGPT, Vanderbilt came right out and was just like, we're not using Turnitin's AI detector. And then, kind of that became actually a super cited website, just that little blog post in AI detection research. All of the people studying AI detection research were Vanderbilt conducted an independent investigation of Turnitin's AI detector, and turned it off very publicly. So I was just wondering, are you guys still kind of measuring these kinds of academic integrity tools, and kind of what does that testing, measuring, vetting process look like at the institutional level?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of conversation. AI in general has obviously generated a lot of conversation in the academic integrity space, and I think part of it is not moving too quickly because, again, if we think about academic integrity as an organizing principle for a community, we are going to have changes, right, over time, whether that's a pedagogical change or a technological change. And we've seen those before and we will see them again. And, I think part of that was taking a step back and having time and space both to evaluate potential tools and what those might look like, but also to have conversations as a campus community. Again, thinking about this as sort of a collaborative endeavor where people could express and debate and discuss different viewpoints about AI. And if we think about it again, academic integrity as our mission is to educate students about good academic practice, we also have to decide what are appropriate uses of AI in various disciplines, what are not appropriate, uses. So I think there's part of that, I think, is taking a step back and really being able to have those conversations really thoughtfully amongst faculty, amongst students. And then obviously, right, there are going to be tools and resources and trying to determine and evaluate what are the best tools and resources, and whether that's looking at internal experiences or obviously benchmarking data or other data, about a particular tool that is out there, to judge, does this tool work and achieve what we want it to achieve? Also, does it fit within the campus context that we're in? And that's another thing. I think, all campuses are a little bit different. The culture is a little bit different. And so some tools or some strategies may work on one campus when they don't work on another. So I think that's where we are. I mean, I think back of, to taking it out of the technological space, right? Pedagogically, there was a time when all work was individual, right? And then we moved into a lot of disciplines started engaging in much more collaborative work. Honor codes and academic integrity had to change because you then had to define the boundaries of what is appropriate collaboration and what is inappropriate collaboration. Same thing with these technological advances. I think it's sort of you're kind of re-level setting based on those kind of changes. So I think there's still lots more space and lots more discussion to be had in around AI and to figure out how best to fit it within the academic integrity context at a particular institution.
Yeah, absolutely. And like it's funny that you mentioned like going from like individual to like group projects because like now it's kind of like the same thing where it's just like a group project but with a very like, all-knowing machine instead of a peer.
Exactly. Yes, exactly.
And
Yeah.
go ahead. I don't want
Oh,
to
go
talk.
ahead, Elvin. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to jump in because I'm very curious to learn more about you mentioned the faculty, and is it that they're talking about that in the syllabus and the syllabi, I guess, about academic integrity? I know some faculty are saying you can use AI in an assignment. It depends on again the discipline or the subject matter. Something like 20% of your paper can be written by an LLM or whatever. So is it something that's talked about in the faculty level? And is that what are you hearing from the faculty in terms of their issues with AI and academic integrity?
So I think some of it really probably varies by discipline. I think there are faculty in some disciplines that maybe have been more resistant to AI or more uncertain about it and the best application of it within their space. And then other faculty who have much more fully and very quickly embraced what AI can offer. So there's definitely conversations amongst faculty, I think, around the parameters and how AI can and should be used within various spaces. In terms of on individual faculty members' syllabi, that's actually what we encourage. Again, if we're talking to faculty and as a best practice, we want faculty to be as explicit as possible about their expectations for students. And so, and that can, be including whether AI is permissible or not, or if it's permissible on some assignments and not others, or if it's permissible to use AI as a tool to generate, X, but not to do Y. So I think in a lot of ways, when the Honor Council is operating and reviewing a report and any matter that would go through a hearing process, they're actually taking a lot from the faculty documentation, whether that's the syllabus itself or instructions for a particular assignment. And that really is a guide that helps determine sometimes whether there was a violation or not, because we want the student to be following the faculty's expectations, and we want the faculty member to be clear about what those expectations are. So it varies. There's not a standard practice, again, giving faculty that autonomy to run their classroom, as they see fit, but certainly from a best practice standpoint, encouraging that level of sort of specificity.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And one last question before I go back to you, Bradley. What trends are you seeing with academic misconduct cases because of AI? Has that shot up right away, or it's kind of steady? Tell us about those trends that are happening on campus.
Yeah, it's interesting. We probably saw a little bit of an increase in AI related cases over the past couple of years, as AI was really kind of emerging. Not as dramatic necessarily as I would have thought. And some of that is, could be for a variety of reasons. It could be that all the dialogue on campus and some of that is generating more explicit instructions around AI in some of the classrooms. It can also be, I think, sometimes when you have a big change, there may be actually a lag in sort of how to clearly identify or what to do in those circumstances. So it may be that there's some kind of lag that we may continue to see an increase as there's more development in the area, if there are tools that faculty members are using and maybe that they feel are, from an efficacy standpoint, stronger, there may be developments that way that could impact how many cases we see. So it's certainly there certainly has been an uptick in those, but not an overwhelming increase.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, kind of like, do you suspect that it's kind of being underreported? Like, because I mean, I think what we hear from a lot of faculty is like, hey, like, I kind of have this like sixth sense that this paper is like fully AI generated, but like, I can't know for sure, so I'm not gonna like go through the hassle of filing a report.
Well, and our faculty manual also gives faculty a little bit of latitude to figure out within the context of the course how they want to handle that type of situation. And generally they are sort of intended to be guided by sort of the level of suspicion and the level of information that they actually have. So it may be that there are instances where they might have a suspicion, but they really don't have a clear enough understanding that it was generated by AI. And so therefore they may be having an educational conversation with a student in the class about it. They may be revising their syllabus or their instructions for an assignment and not turning a student into the honor council. Obviously, the honor council is going to want to have enough information to actually make a determination. Is it more likely than not that the student violated the honor code by using AI? So that certainly could be the case, that there's also some things happening within the classroom, which again, if we're all intended to be here for an educational purpose, there's room and space to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of building off that too, like kind of like with these AI cheating cases, like kind of how are you seeing most of them resolved? Do you feel like most of them are like kind of genuine misunderstanding? Like a student is like, oh, like, I thought that we could use AI for X, but actually like it was the case that we could only use it for Y. Or do you feel that it's kind of more like, I guess, like intentional behavior, that they are aware of the expectations, but they, put under a lot of stress and pressure. They just kind of had a lapse in judgment.
I think most of what we're seeing is not intentional or malicious or like wholesale use of AI. I do think that a lot of the cases that we have seen probably are the result of a little bit of sloppiness, honestly, on the student's part, where they may be using AI as a resource in a way that is probably okay and appropriate, but as they're transitioning between whatever that might help them with in terms of idea generation or things like that, as they're refining, they're not as clean in their process, and therefore, things slip in that probably shouldn't be there or generated by AI. So I think that's probably more what we see than like a wholesale just using AI for everything and turning it in, flatly like that is more, I think, yeah, I'll call it sloppiness.
Yeah, for sure. We actually went to a really interesting like virtual talk by Chris Oster yesterday, and kind of he was talking about like how in his writing class he has the students fill out a disclosure form, which is like, okay, like I used AI, I used this tool, I used it expressly for this purpose, and you can see the AI writing in like this part of my paper. And he kind of like offers a deal to his students. He's like, okay, like if you disclose this to me, I will not honor code you. He's like, I will potentially make you rewrite things if I think that you maybe overused it a little bit, like if you were a little bit sloppy. But at least I liked it because it at least removes the fear of like, okay, like you're not going to get absolutely busted, as long as you are honest and transparent with me, which I thought was kind of cool.
And I think a lot of faculty who are allowing the use of AI have similar tactics that they're using. I mean, I know some faculty are requiring, um, some kind of statement or citation or something in a paper indicating which parts are generated by AI. So something similar, maybe not quite as formal sounding as a disclosure statement, but but
Sure.
something along those lines where there is space to indicate the use of AI and how much and what it's for. So I think we are seeing that with some of the faculty, particularly the faculty who have kind of embraced AI much more quickly, but still giving some thought around parameters and, like you said, just disclosure and common understanding of what is AI and what's not between the faculty member and the student.
Yeah, for sure. And are you guys trying to kind of push the faculty more in that direction, or is it more just like, if you want to ban AI in your classroom, we'll just let you?
I don't think anyone has taken a hard line position on that as of now. I think we're still in a space where there's, a lot of dialogue happening around AI. I think most people are coming around to the idea that there are some interesting uses of AI and there may be ways to use it for particular tasks or or other, particular functions within a discipline while not creating some of the problematic things that would result if you sort of wholesale used it. So I think there's still a lot of conversation happening, and a lot of people who had some initial uncertainty and resistance have come around to seeing what some of the benefits could be. I mean, I was more uncertain just because I didn't know that much about it. And as I've learned more and more about it, I can sort of see different use cases for it, both obviously for students in the classroom, but honestly, even for staff in various ways that we can make things more efficient and more effective. So taking a look at that and sort of being open to how it might be used, but also wanting to make sure that there are appropriate parameters in place so that it's not overused or used in an inappropriate way.
Oh, totally. And it's so discipline dependent too. Like, I mean, I think some disciplines, obviously, like, computer science, learning about AI is mandatory pretty much. But,
Yeah,
in, philosophy, like maybe less so. Like maybe, it still more is about kind of the organic nature of coming up with ideas on your own and things like that.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, well, this has been an awesome conversation, GL. So before I ask you my last question, I'm going to turn it back to Bradley, see if you have one more question for GL.
No, go for it, Alvin.
Okay, fantastic. So, GL, we are asking everyone the same question at the end, and we would love to get your thoughts on that. Other than knowing what GL stands for, which is like a big mystery, we would love to know that. But let's see, what does the future of academic integrity look like to you?
So I think I would hope that it would be a continued evolution in the same sort of collaborative, community-oriented way that it has been on our campus in particular, knowing that we will likely continue to see technological advances, changes in teaching, other changes that could impact higher education and sort of systems and structures. But I think it's really important. The spirit of it to me is that collaborative effort of a campus community coming together. And I would really hope that it would be able to retain those sort of hallmark components. And for us, I would really want it to maintain the student-initiated, student-led component as well. We've been doing that for so long, and I think it has really been impactful and effective. So I definitely would want to keep those hallmarks while obviously wanting to be nimble and adaptable to be able to shift and pivot to these kind of changes like AI or some other technological change or some other change to teaching. But it's one of those areas I sort of in my position always want to say, oh, I've seen it all, but that's never true. Every single day, there's something else that happens that I'm like, well, okay, I did not see that coming. So, I think we just need to be open to who knows what's going to happen, and instead, be ready to pivot and take on whatever challenge, comes our way in the future.
Oh, 100%. I laugh a lot, GL, because I worked in higher ed for over 20 years. And I remember saying, oh, I've seen it. No, I haven't every day. Nope, I didn't see that one coming. It's part of the beauty of the job as well, isn't it?
It really is. It really is.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, thanks again for your time. We appreciate it. So I'm going to outro my co-host with the most, Bradley Emmy, CTO and co-founder of Pangram Labs. Bradley, thank you as always.
Always a pleasure, Alvin.
Absolutely. And ladies and gentlemen, your guest today, he is GL. Don't tell me what the GL stands for. Black Vice Provost for Student Affairs and Dean of Students at Vanderbilt University. GL, thank you so very much for being with us.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It was fun.
Absolutely. There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. You've just ed up.
Thank you for listening. This episode is part of our Academic Integrity series, sponsored by Pangram Labs, the world's leading AI detection technology. Try it out at pangram.com. That's PANGRAM.com.